the French humanitarian organization Doctors Without Borders, also known as MSF, says South Sudanese from the internally displaced persons camp in Abu Rock in South Sudan have started moving across the border to Sudan, many arriving at the border severely dehydrated and in need of medical care. Now, as fighting spreads in the former Upper Nile state, over 20,000 South Sudanese have fled the horrendous living conditions and fighting around Abu Rock's IDP camp for increasingly overcrowded refugee camps in Sudan. While many more of the estimated 18,000 people left behind will take the road north to Sudan, others will stay in Abu Rock, hoping that desperately needed clean water, food and shelter will arrive. Many people were originally from Malakal and then moved for safety to the town of Wau Shiluk. They moved again, fleeing to Abu Rock when it was attacked earlier this year. Other people came to the IDP camp from the nearby town of Kodok after fighting broke out 2 weeks ago. All right, so the head of the MSF mission in South Sudan, Marcus Bachman, now joins me live via Skype. And as you can see, he's on our super wall. So let's speak to him now about that situation in South Sudan. Marcus, thank you so much for making the time for us here on Worldview. So let's start off with the alarm that's been raised by your organization. Describe to us the situation in South Sudan at the moment.
Good afternoon. South Sudan is now at the end of the dry season, and fighting is intensifying in various parts of the country. You mentioned before Upper Nile State. It's a conflict-torn part of the country, but there's also new parts which previously were not that bad affected, like the Equatorias, Central Equatoria, Eastern Equatoria, Western Equatoria as well. This has led to the biggest displacement crisis on the African continent, with about 3.9 million people displaced, half of them internally displaced, and 1.9 million people displaced to neighboring countries. 900,000 Uganda, 400,000 Sudan, 400,000 Ethiopia, 100,000 Kenya, and another nearly 100,000 to Congo DRC. People are exhausted from multiple episodes of displacement. Their coping mechanisms are exhausted, and due to the very bad economic environment, even if there's food available on the market, it's not accessible for the population who simply lack the financial means to buy the food.
Interesting way you describe this, and very important for us to put that into perspective. So tell us about your operations and how that is working to help these millions of South Sudanese who are displaced within the country and, of course, across the borders.
MSF is following the population who is now displaced on the fighting. That's one of the characteristics in South Sudan. Drives people out of the places where they seek refuge. Increasingly, our population in need is in very, very remote, in very, very inaccessible areas. To give you one example, in Southern Unity, the last resort of the last resort are the swamps, are islands in the River Nile. They are very, very hard to access for humanitarians to provide assistance. We have a population in Abu Rock. It's a very remote place, far away from any water source, very difficult for humanitarians to reach, both in terms of logistics and security. MSF is committed to stay with the population, and we do respond with mobile teams in order to reach out for the population. In Abu Rock, as we speak, we have to deal with a cholera outbreak. We have about 15 to 20 admissions of suspected cholera cases every single day. And I have just spoken before your news show with my team on the ground, and they have confirmed that we have now 40 suspected cholera patients under care in our cholera treatment unit in Abu Rock. We have decided to do a cholera vaccination campaign starting Wednesday this week in order to provide a preventative package to the population. But the biggest bottleneck in Abu Rock is the lack of water. Water is absolutely essential in order to win the battle against cholera outbreak in this camp.
Okay, Marcus, what about state authorities in the country? To what extent are they helping or perhaps hurting your operations, and indeed of other humanitarian organizations that are based in South Sudan?
Humanitarians in South Sudan face manifold challenges of access. One of the issues I mentioned before is that population is driven to the most remote areas, which are hard to access logistically. However, security is very fragile. We are, as humanitarians, very often operating across front lines. I spend the better part of my day to talk with all the parties to the conflict to get their assurances, to get the clearances to access populations in need. Sometimes we are still reluctant to provide aid because we know that we attract with our medical services larger groups of population, and we cannot always be sure that they might not get into crossfire or might even be targeted. So this puts very big constraints on our services to provide services to the population, and also humanitarians face these challenges. When is it safe enough for the population to access the services? When is it safe enough for the humanitarians to go into places? Sometimes we go in for 2 days, then we need to leave again. We go in for 1 day in order to go out again after 1 day. So we are fighting a constant battle also with the very unstable and insecure environment in which we are currently operating.
Yeah, security obviously a big challenge for you there. Do you think there's a sense in which more needs to be done from the international community, or have people largely forgotten about the crisis in South Sudan and sort of moved on?
I think what the South Sudan and its population need most is peace. It's a cessation of the hostilities. An end needs to be put to the conflict in order to avoid the population who is totally suffering to completely lose their last coping mechanisms.
All right, thanks very much. That's Marcus Backman, and we wish you all the best, and thank you for the work that you continue to do for those internally displaced in South Sudan. Marcus Backman is the MSF head of mission for the country of South Sudan. Explaining to us the situation there, he calls it the biggest displacement on the continent, with 3.9 million South Sudanese currently fleeing those areas of conflict.